So the 18-month plus battle, FTC, Activision-Blizzard, Xbox, Sony saga has finally kind of come to a close. Not yet, but the biggest thing with this deal has been the FTC. You know, we've had other government bodies around the world, most of them agreeing to or not having an issue with the Activision-Blizzard deal in Microsoft, except the CMA over in the UK. But the FTC in the United States have been the main one everybody's been waiting for. So this past week, we did get a 5-day trial going through everything. We've seen email leaks. We've seen secret deals that may or may not have been going on. We've seen a lot of dirty laundry, leaked emails, just everything you was expecting to see. And Twitter's been going crazy. YouTube's been going crazy. I've pretty much been holding off on saying anything about this whole thing for the last year or so, just because it just kept being this ongoing thing. And I was like, okay, I'll wait till things kind of clear up and seem like they're coming to a conclusion. And the trial's pretty much over. We'll just have to wait for a decision from the judge, which can come, who knows. We got the holiday weekend coming up. It may come up in a couple weeks, in a month, who knows. But I wanted to just go over in this video and go over like each day of the trial, where the major things we kind of learned, what were some of the arguments from both sides, and then give my take on it. So if you're new to the channel, please make sure you do like this video, subscribe if you have not. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're almost halfway there, so I appreciate all you guys who have subscribed so far. But with all that out of the way, let's roll the intro. So the majority of the, screenshots you're going to see, the quotes and everything that I'm getting is going to come from an article on The Verge, which I'm linked in the description below. So if you want to check it out for yourself, you can. But from day one, we got to start off talking about this email that Microsoft presented that pretty much was a big, bombshell of a drop. So it pretty much had Jim Ryan kind of downplaying the Activision deal and like saying they would be fine. So the quote goes, "It is not an exclusivity play at all," said Ryan. "They're thinking bigger than that, and they have the cash to make moves like this." Ryan wasn't concerned about Call of Duty exclusivity because he had spoken to Activision CEO Bobby Kotick, Xbox chief Phil Spencer, and even had reassurances from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Sony was also just about to announce its plan to acquire Bungie just days after Ryan's email exchange. "We have some good stuff cooking," said Ryan, referring to Bungie. "I'm not complacent, and I'd rather this hadn't happened, but we'll be okay. We'll be more than okay." So why this is important is because this whole time Jim Ryan's been going on about, oh, we're not going to be able to compete. We're going to cease to exist if this deal goes through. And then you have this email where he's literally saying like, they'll be fine. Like, I'm sure he had some questions and things like that. And this was probably the first, email exchange talking about the deal. But it's kind of like, this looks very opposite of how we've been seeing Jim Ryan act throughout this whole saga. And you'll kind of see that between a little bit on both sides, from Sony and Microsoft, where it's like, emails are coming out from 2019, 2020, 2021, and then now we're hearing the opposite and things like that. So this was kind of crazy and a really strong showing for Microsoft to start off in day one. Now, another claim from the FTC throughout this entire trial every day was this whole focus on Nintendo. So Microsoft has kept saying, Phil Spencer is saying like, listen, we're in third place, we're losing the console war, we can't compete, all these kind of things. And the FTC is trying to argue that Nintendo, for some reason, isn't in the competition with them, or they're a whole separate, audience. And Sony kind of played into this as well, saying, they target a younger audience and all these kind of things. But Xbox is saying like, listen, we're the same. Like, whether, PlayStation, Xbox has always been more compared as far as like power goes, but like that's kind of been going on forever. Like, even with the Wii days, right? Like, you had the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, they're more comparable. The PlayStation 4, Xbox One. But Nintendo's still in the same market. They share some of those same games. Yeah, it's a hybrid system, but it is the same competition. Sarah Bond also did, testify during this day, and we did get some kind of gray area type of answers as far as xCloud goes. So what the FTC is really focusing on is this whole idea that, Xbox is kind of dominating the, cloud gaming market. And then we did see like there were some, emails from Matt Booty saying like he didn't like what GeForce and Nvidia and all these guys are doing, and Sarabon kind of had to say like, listen, it's not a whole market right now, because it isn't for the most part. Like cloud gaming is still a very small part of the gaming market, and it was kind of interesting that the CMA blocked the deal because of cloud gaming. But she basically argued that it's more of a feature and not a whole separate market. Now, the reason this is kind of interesting is because we did see, a little bit while ago, there was the, Microsoft Keynote, or whatever it was called, Keystone, something like that. No, that's a beer. Keynote, I think, was the name of it. But it was basically going to be a dedicated streaming device. But, Phil Spencer said, the price and everything didn't make sense. Sarabon said that we get revenue from it, but when we look at all the numbers, the revenue we get per minute per hour from that is lower than the cost we get per minute per hour of that. Essentially, Microsoft isn't making money out of xCloud yet because it's costly to put modified Xbox hardware in data centers and run it as a feature that's mostly used by Xbox players to try games before they download them. So this is, again, a major point of contention because people see, Stadia's out of business and stuff, and you did have Google come in here and kind of talk, but there is that part of the market that isn't there yet. And I think the FTC is kind of looking long term, like they're looking like, okay, yeah, you're doing these 10-year deals and stuff with Nintendo and GeForce and all this stuff, but they're kind of looking at like, where are we going to be as far as, mobile, cloud gaming, all these kind of things in the future, which, I can't say I'm mad at, because you can't say, oh, today this isn't a threat to competition, but clearly in a few years it will be, and then you have a monopoly, which you kind of want to avoid. But, in this court case, a lot of it is you have to bring facts and not a bunch of hypotheticals, even if they are possibilities. You can bring them because they are concerns, but as far as like what is here and what's now, you got to stick to that. You can't stick to what can be in 10 years and let that be your whole argument. So on day 2, we did have Phil Spencer take the stand for, I think it was like 2 hours or something like that. And, one of the main things we got from this day was him talking about the purchasing of Zenimax kind of being fueled by Xbox almost missing out on Starfield. So we know Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo were PlayStation 5 timed exclusives, but that happening, as well as Starfield possibly missing Xbox, kind of pushed Xbox to buy ZeniMax, which is kind of crazy when you look at this year and kind of looking towards the future around like some of the exclusives, and with Bethesda being like at a big front of that for Xbox. Without that, I mean, I don't know. This generation might have been even scarier than it has been to start already. The quote from Phil says, "When we acquired ZeniMax, one of the impetus for that is that Sony had done a deal for Deathloop and Ghostwire to pay Bethesda to not ship those games on Xbox. So the discussion about Starfield, when we heard that Starfield was potentially also going to end up skipping Xbox, we can't be in a position as a third place console where we will fall further behind on our content ownership, so we'd had to secure content to remain viable in the business." So I do agree with that. I mean, some people could say this Activision deal is a little bit of desperation, but I mean, I'd rather be desperate and make a move than, just try and appease people's, whatever they think of you, right? Or like do it the hard way. Like Xbox has the money, right? The infrastructure. So it's, hey, let's pay and get this, because missing Starfield, like I said, when you look at this year with Minecraft Legends, a lot of people didn't care about. Hi-Fi Rush was great. Redfall's a disaster. You got Forza, and then that would have been it. Like, obviously, things could have moved around because they know they did have Bethesda, but, it's interesting to see, like, what happens with that. And then we did see Sony purchase Bungie pretty much soon after that. So it was a kind of, these things are a response, and that's kind of Xbox's whole thing is, like, we're not so big on this exclusivity thing and all that. And like Phil has said that, like, they want to put Game Pass on every device. You want to play everywhere. Like, we're playing a different game than this whole like exclusive, just console only. Like, we want to get money everywhere that we can, but we can't do that, and we can't push competition, and there is a balance to it, but we can't do that with Sony doing these deals, these third-party deals, these times exclusive, the Square Enix deals, like all these kinds of things. So we saw that being basically Phil saying this ZeniMax purchase was a result of those games almost missing Xbox. This also led to us seeing like, where does the future hold as far as exclusives outside of Activision, because that's what everybody's been thinking about. So the FTC did ask about plans for The Elder Scrolls 6, which we know is in development right now. So Spencer refused to confirm whether Elder Scrolls 6 is an Xbox exclusive or not. I think we've been a little unclear on what platforms it's launching on, given how far out the game is. So some people are kind of mad at this because it's like, dang, I thought we were going to get it at least by 2026, 2027 maybe. He said it's difficult for us right now to nail down. Spencer did previously hint that Elder Scrolls 6 would be an Xbox exclusive, but the game is still years away. Have you had conversations at Microsoft about skipping PlayStation or Activision titles? Spencer was asked by the FTC. I don't remember a specific conversation, but it would seem like a normal conversation for us to have. So there was other quotes coming out that he said it was at least 5 years away. So we could possibly see the Elder Scrolls 6 being a Xbox Series, whatever the next system is, launch title in 2028. It's very possible. I mean, they might be lining up for that. A game coming out 17 years after its predecessor, and then Fallout 5 coming out even years after that, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then some more information kind of came out where we're focusing on the king part of the Activision-Blizzard deal, right? It's ABK. That is the mobile gaming market, which is huge. People kind of not think about it that much, but, you know, there's hundreds of million people playing, you know, Minecraft on their phone. There's people playing Genshin Impact. You know, I don't know if Angry Birds is still big. I'm not big in mobile game, but it is a big part of the, you know, the industry that a lot of people, you know, aren't really focusing on. So Phil said the deal, as we talked about, expands our business to the mobile platform. The existing business that we run today as a third place console business is very difficult business to drive profit and margin. So the opportunity for us to expand in a meaningful way onto mobile, the world's largest gaming platform, was really both a strategic and business opportunity behind this deal. So the reason this is important, because reports came out of different things that Microsoft was thinking of acquiring back in 2021, and, you know, Zynga was on there. Take-Two ended up grabbing them, but that was a big purchase for them. And then we got some leaks and some pictures of some other acquisitions that Microsoft was thinking of getting. Phil has mentioned there being kind of like a cap on how big of an audience you can get from console gaming and things like that, and that's why he wants to expand so much. So from this picture, this was for, you know, mergers and acquisitions and what it would kind of help with Microsoft. So it says the gap was either audience expansion or engagement, social interaction, and you see the companies Supergiant, Thunderful, Niantic, which would have been crazy if you think about it with Pokemon Go and all the games they're doing, Layerix, Zynga, as we mentioned earlier. And then you also see Bungie, IO Interactive, and Scopely. But then reports also came out that Sega was at play. And we've seen like Sega have a really good relationship with Microsoft, Nintendo as well. But, you know, we've seen the Yakuza series come out. We've seen Atlas put their Persona games on Game Pass, things like that. So listen, Sega came out recently and said that, you know, at this time they want to remain independent, but hey, who knows in the future? Who knows what was happening 2 years ago? So again, Microsoft, I don't know if this is trying to make them look, you know, bad or what, but people got to think about this. Goes outside of gaming. This is one of the biggest tech companies in the world. This is $1 trillion tech company, and this is one of the biggest tech mergers ever. Like, you're always going to see trials trying to block this. We've seen this stuff, you know, time and time again. Like, people need to think of it as Microsoft and Activision-Blizzard. This is not your little Xbox, Call of Duty. Like, this is a big deal in American competition and the way the industry goes. So now we get into day 3, and day 3 saw a 70-minute pre-recording deposition from Jim Ryan in a conversation. And one of the first things that they talked about was he was kind of describing what Microsoft's whole brand was about, which was funny because, you know, there's been jokes about, you know, Xbox shooter box and all this kind of stuff. Like, that's kind of what they were known for. But he basically said many of their games involve an element of shooting, and many of their games involve moments of online multiplayer, both of which typically are more popular in the US than they are outside of the US. And, you know, that kind of makes sense. Like, Xbox has that, dude, bro, whatever type of, connotation surrounding it and everything like that. And, Call of Duty deals used to be on Xbox 360 back in the day. So that's kind of how he views Xbox in that way. Then Nintendo Switch again came up again, and Jim Ryan was kind of arguing, hey, we're not in the same audience as them. We're not going after the same things, and kind of say that Xbox and PlayStation are more in competition than Nintendo, even though Nintendo has a $120 million player base. But, I mean, who knows? Going on to say, we consider Nintendo to participate in a different market segment to Xbox and PlayStation. Nintendo's hardware technology is a much less sophisticated nature than PlayStation or Xbox. Its hardware typically retails for a cheaper price, and its audience is aimed rather younger. So this was an argument that kind of went on throughout the entire trial. It was, hey, the price points aren't the same, the audience is different, the technology is different, all these kind of things. And like, while all that is true, and Nintendo has even said, they're kind of just focusing on doing their own thing and not, they even released a Switch before the other two consoles came out, mostly because the Wii U was a failure. But, it's a conversation to be had, but I don't think most people are just like, okay, I could get one system. Is it the Switch? Is it like some people get the Switch and something else, and they've been doing that forever. Like Nintendo has always had a cheaper system, a less powerful system, and they just do that because they focus more on gameplay and quality of games and story than just the big AAA, walking sim, big, expansive 1,000-hour game. Like, that's just not their thing. But again, they're going to make the argument. And then some more arguments came up surrounding Sony being kind of wary around sending, dev kits of their PlayStation 6 or their next system, whatever they're going to call it, probably will be called PlayStation 6, because when you need to develop a game, developers need to have the system or some form of it or a prototype in order to, create the game for that system, such if it's going to launch on that system. So now Sony is saying, well, they're going to be kind of hurt if they send that for them to develop Call of Duty on, and Microsoft owns Call of Duty. They'll be able to, look at their PlayStation 6, kind of modify maybe their system and things like that. And, while that is a concern, it's kind of like, I mean, it's a moot point. Like at that point, it's like, what do you want them to do? Like you would have to do that same point. Like to that point, if you wanted Starfield or let's say Elder Scrolls 6 on PlayStation, you're going to have to do the same thing unless you want a non-optimized version of the game. When the PlayStation 6 is going to come out, you're going to have to send those dev kits to Microsoft because they own Bethesda. So I don't know. I don't see, like, I get it, but it's kind of like, what do you want them to do about that? That's kind of just going to be part of the nature of the business at that point. So Jim Ryan said, we simply could not run the risk of a company that was owned by a direct competitor having access to that information. The development kits allow developers to have visibility and to work on the feature set that our new consoles will deploy. So again, it's, if you want the game on your system, that's what you're going to have to do, no matter who owns it. So then the conversation came up around, when did Jim Ryan start getting kind of like antsy about this deal going through? Because as we said earlier, when they first had that email about the deal, he said, oh, they should be okay, it'll be fine, they got stuff cooking, they'll be all right. And then all of a sudden he's going to regulators, trying to strike down the deal, he's all this kind of stuff. And apparently it happened around August of 2022, and it was after Phil kind of sent the list of what games will remain on PlayStation, and he didn't like it. There was some games that weren't on there. He said there was Overwatch, but not Overwatch 2, which there's no Overwatch 1 anymore. So I don't know. That kind of threw him off, I guess. And do we buy this? I don't know. It just seems very weird. Like, you said you would be fine without Call of Duty, but Overwatch or Crash Bandicoot or one of these other franchises, where you draw the line, I don't know. I don't buy that. Another talking point from both sides was this idea around exclusives, right? That's the whole thing with this Call of Duty thing. Like, will they make it exclusive to Xbox? And the FTC said that They were arguing that the exclusive games could be anti-competitive, leaning on Microsoft's Bethesda acquisition, where the company made Redfall and Starfield exclusive to Xbox and PC. Jim Ryan's asked if there's anything wrong in Microsoft doing exclusives. He says, I don't like it, but I fundamentally have no quarrel with it. And he said, what about Starfield? He said, I don't like it, but I don't view it as anti-competitive. So he, with his own mouth, said, he doesn't like it, but at the same time he can't. The reason he has to say I don't have any quarrels with it is because Sony does the same thing, right? Like, they bought Bungie, but Bungie was pretty adamant on, listen, we're not doing an exclusive thing, but Sony kind of threw their hands up and just did it anyway. But we've seen it with these Square Enix deals, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy 16, the deals they have with Marvel to have Spider-Man only on there. Like, that's just kind of how it works. They do these deals, they do these licensing deals, they do these timed exclusives, they do a lot of the same things. So he can't really say no, it's bad for competition. And the FTC kind of trying to make that argument that it is bad for competition, but then Jim Ryan saying he doesn't see it as anti-competitive kind of goes against their point of saying that. And then Jim Ryan even goes on to say, one of the reasons why we are investing massively in first-party development and publishing is to provide us with an edge against pressure on a historic business model. Having a business model where you own elements from top to bottom increases your ability to be self-determined. So again, he's talking about exclusives and first-party things, and whether that comes from you developing in your own studios or you acquiring studios to get new games, it's all first-party at the end of the day. So that's why he's kind of hesitant on just like sticking to that point, like, no, we don't want exclusives. But he does keep pushing about how much the Call of Duty not being on PlayStation would hurt them, even though Microsoft has tried to put out these 10-year deals for them, which they refuse to sign. So I don't know. So when Microsoft was talking to Jim Ryan, they asked him, do you think it would be better if Microsoft kept Activision games on PlayStation? He said, yes, I do. Then they said, so do you believe it's Microsoft's best interest to make Activision deals available on multi-platforms? And he said, no, I don't agree with that. And they said, so if you were running Xbox, would you recommend making Call of Duty and other Activision games exclusive to Xbox and PC? He said, that's a hypothetical question that I don't wish to answer. They said, so you don't get to answer? And he said, I don't have enough knowledge to answer that question. So this is kind of obvious, right? Like, if you're owning a company or you're in charge of the business, you're going to do what's in the best, best interest of that company. Of course, he would say he thinks it's better for it to stay on PlayStation, but when you put it in, okay, now say you're Xbox, would it be in their best interest to do that? He said no. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of common sense at this point. Then the conversation came up around the subscription models, which is Game Pass. And Jim Ryan said at the same meeting that he discussed Microsoft Game Pass push and the proposed Activision-Blizzard acquisition. He said that has driven them to make a large acquisition. I talked to all publishers and they unanimously do not like Game Pass because it's value destructive. He went on to say in his deposition that I talk to publishers all the time and that is a very commonly held view over many years by the publishers. And this I just call cap. Like, I don't even talk like that, but it just makes no sense. Like, we keep seeing these Game Pass deals with Capcom, with Atlas, with all these indie companies. We're seeing it all the time. So when he says he's talking to all publishers and they see it as value destructive, it's like, he could be right, as in they're saying it cannibalizes sales as far as people not actually buying the game, but if it was that bad to them revenue-wise, they wouldn't do the deals. Like, they're getting money up front, they're getting the access to help develop these games, they're working with Microsoft directly sometimes. Like, it's very disingenuous to just say, oh, they think it's value destructive. Like, yeah, I think it's kind of obvious that if something's on Game Pass, less people are going to buy it. If a movie's on Netflix, less people are going to buy the movie. Why would you pay $20 for a movie? Why would you pay $70 for a video game when you could pay $10 and have access to it for a whole month and then beat it and then move on to the next thing and have hundreds of other games day one in Game Pass? This is, I don't know, man. It's like, I just don't get the angle of some of these conversations. Now, moving on to day 4, we did have Satya and Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, and then we have Bobby Kotick from Activision, and they came in and they both kind of expressed that they also don't like the exclusive thing. Now, for Bobby Kotick, this makes sense because if you're owner of a publisher like Activision, you want Call of Duty, you want Overwatch, you want, whatever, Crash Bandicoot, you want all of these IPs on as many devices as possible. You cut the revenue, whatever, 80, 20, 70, 30, however you do it, and you get all that money. Of course, he's going to say that. Now, the CEO of Microsoft saying it, I guess he would feel the same way because he's this whole idea of putting your games in as many places as possible and making as much money. That's what he's looking at. This driving console sales, like we already know, like these companies either break even or lose money on the consoles. It's all about the software, not the hardware. Like we've seen Nintendo Switch might be a little different story because it's a little cheaper to build those things, but they're got 120 million systems sold, but they have like over 1 billion pieces of software downloaded and bought on the system. So it's kind of like that's where the money is. It's put it everywhere, subscriptions, whatever, get as many users on as possible, and maybe they'll buy stuff while they're here. But this whole emphasis on you can only play this here and it's going to make consoles console sales. There's just so many ways to game right now that like it's more cost effective to go over the big picture and not just, okay, we sold 100 million Xboxes, but it's like, okay, but how many games did you sell? Did you get more subscriptions? Is your player base only on the system or is it everywhere else? Did you grow PC? That's where the conversation needs to go. And then day 5 pretty much wrapped up the trial. There was a whole closing remarks and everything. FTC was kind of pushing this economic model that they had a person make for them that said that, if Call of Duty goes to Xbox exclusively, which Xbox kept saying they won't do. They've signed 10-year deals to not do that, and it wouldn't be advantageous for them to do it. But either way, FTC keeps pushing that. They're claiming that 20% of those people will move and go buy an Xbox. The judge kept asking, like, okay, where'd this number come from? How can you prove this? What if the people just buy it on PC? What if people own a PC already? What if the game isn't exclusive? Like, how can you definitively say that's how many people will move? And they're bringing numbers from, the people who played between 20 hours to 200 hours. And then, like, they're using data from the last generation. And the judge is pretty much just like, trying to wrap this up like, yo, I need you to give me some concrete. You're giving me hypotheticals. You're giving me extreme numbers. I don't get where the math ain't mathin', basically, is what the judge was saying. And then they brought up Nintendo again. It's just like, Nintendo is showing out. Miyamoto sitting at home making all this money off of Tears of the Kingdom. It's just like, bro, why do y'all keep bringing us up? Stay over there. We not part of this, all right? And that's pretty much how the trial went. Of course, there was a lot more. I can't go into everything, but I just wanted to point out the biggest parts of the trial that I thought this needed to be talked about and just my thoughts on it. So where's it going to go? I don't know. The judge said she won't take 2 to 3 months to come up with this, but we also know it's a holiday weekend coming up, so we don't know. We don't know when we'll hear this, but time is of the essence because Microsoft also signed a deal to give Activision $3 billion if this deal isn't closed by July 18th, and that is rapidly approaching. So, whatever happens. In my eyes, I think it is leaning more towards Microsoft, like, winning this thing just because of, not only the world pretty much agreeing with it, but it's like the FTC had to do a better job of fighting against it and making more arguments against the deal more than Microsoft had to make arguments for the deal, if that made sense. Everything Microsoft did, whether it was the 10-year, deals or, explaining this or moving that or making stuff multiplayer, whatever things they did was to appease and, give concessions and things like that to the law bodies, concerns. But the law body's got to prove that this is not good for competition. This is not good for the consumers. The consumers is the important part. Not, it's not fair to Sony and this, that, and the third. They sound like Sony's honestly paying them. To be honest, that's what it sounds like to me. But we'll see. Once we get a decision, we'll go from there and what that kind of means for Microsoft moving forward. But if it doesn't fall in their favor, Microsoft has a bunch of games that or other publishers they'll probably go after as well. $3 billion on the table being lost would suck, but hey, $1 trillion company. So y'all let me know what y'all think. Comment section below. What y'all think of this whole saga? Are you ready for it to be over? I'm ready to be over. That's why I haven't made any videos on it. But y'all let me know. Subscribe if you haven't. Like I said, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate it. Leave a like. Click all the links in the description. And I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.